We start with a point. Like the point we know from geometry, it has no size, no dimension. It's just an imaginary idea that indicates a position in a system. A second point, then, can be used to indicate a different position. But it, too, is of indeterminate size. To create the first dimension, all we need is a line joining any 2 points. A first-dimensional object has length only, no width or depth. If we now take our first-dimensional line and draw a second line crossing the first, we've entered the second dimension. The object we're representing now has a length and a width, but no depth. To help us with imagining the higher dimensions, we're going to represent our second-dimensional object as being created using a second line, which branches off from the first. Now let's imagine a race of two-dimensional creatures called flatlanders. What would it be like to be a flatlander living in their two-dimensional world? A two-dimensional creature would have only length and width, as if they were the royalty on an impossibly flat playing card. Picture this. A flatlander couldn't possibly have a digestive tract because the pipe from their mouth to their bottom would divide them into 2 pieces. And a flatlander trying to view our three-dimensional world would only be able to perceive shapes in two-dimensional cross-sections. A balloon, for instance, would start as a tiny dot, become a hollow circle which inexplicably grows to a certain size, then shrinks back to a dot before popping out of existence. And we three-dimensional human beings would seem very strange indeed to a flatlander. Imagining the third dimension is the easiest for us because every moment of our lives, that's what we're in. A three-dimensional object has length, width, and height. But here's another way to describe the third dimension. If we imagine an ant walking across a newspaper which is lying on a table, we can pretend that the ant is a flatlander walking along on a flat two-dimensional newspaper world. If that paper is now folded in the middle, we create a way for our flatlander ant to magically disappear from one position in his two-dimensional world and be instantly transported to another. We can imagine that we did this by taking a two-dimensional object and folding it through the dimension above, which is our third dimension. Once again, it'll be more convenient for us as we imagine the higher dimensions if we can think of the third dimension in this way. The third dimension is what you fold through to jump from one point to another in the dimension below. Okay, the first 3 dimensions can be described with these words: length, width, and depth. What word can we assign to the fourth dimension? One answer would be duration. If we think of ourselves as we were 1 minute ago, and then imagine ourselves as we are at this moment, the line we could draw from the 1 minute ago version to the right now version would be a line in the fourth dimension. If you were to see your body in the fourth dimension, you'd be like a long undulating snake, with your embryonic self at one end and your deceased self at the other. But because we live from moment to moment in the third dimension, we're like our second-dimensional flatlanders. Just like that flatlander who could only see two-dimensional cross-sections of objects from the dimension above, we, as three-dimensional creatures, can only see three-dimensional cross-sections of our fourth-dimensional self. One of the most intriguing aspects of there being one dimension stacked on another is that down here in the dimensions below, we can be unaware of our motion in the dimensions above. Here's a simple example. If we make a Mobius strip, take a long strip of paper, add one twist to it and tape the ends together, and draw a line down the length of it, our line will eventually be on both sides of the paper before it meets back with itself. It appears, somewhat amazingly, that the strip has only one side, so it must be a representation of a two-dimensional object. And this means that a two-dimensional flatlander, traveling down the line we just drew, would end up back where they started without ever feeling like they had left the second dimension. In reality, they would be looping and twisting in the third dimension, even though to them it felt like they were traveling in a straight line. The fourth dimension, time, feels like a straight line to us, moving from the past to the future. But that straight line in the fourth dimension is, like the Mobius strip, actually twisting and turning in the dimension above. So the long undulating snake that is us will feel like it is moving in a straight line in the fourth dimension, but there will actually be, in the fifth dimension, a multitude of paths that we could branch to at any given moment. Those branches will be influenced by our own choice, chance, and the actions of others. Quantum physics tells us that the subatomic particles that make up our world are collapsed from waves of probabilities simply by the act of observation. In the picture we are drawing for ourselves here, we can now start to see how each of us are collapsing the indeterminate wave of probable futures contained in the fifth dimension into the fourth dimensional line that we are experiencing as time. What if you wanted to go back into your own childhood and visit yourself? We can imagine folding the fourth dimension through the fifth, jumping back through time and space to get there. But what if you wanted to get to the world where, for example, you had created a great invention as a child that by now had made you famous and rich? We can imagine our fourth dimensional selves branching out from our current moment into the fifth dimension. But no matter where you go from here, the great child inventor timeline is not one of the available options in your current version of time. You can't get there from here, no matter how much choice, chance, and the actions of others become involved. There are only two ways you could get to that world. One would be to travel back in time, somehow trigger the events that caused you to come up with your invention, then travel forward in the fifth dimension to see one of the possible new worlds that might have resulted. But that would be taking the long way. The shortcut we could take would involve us folding the fifth dimension through the sixth dimension, which allows us to instantly jump from our current position to a different fifth dimensional line. In our description of the fourth dimension, we imagine taking the dimension below and conceiving of it as a single point. The fourth dimension is a line which can join the universe as it was 1 minute ago to the universe as it is right now. Or, in the biggest picture possible, we could say that the fourth dimension is a line which joins the Big Bang to one of the possible endings of our universe. Now, as we enter the seventh dimension, we're about to imagine a line which treats the entire sixth dimension as if it were a single point. To do that, we have to imagine all the possible timelines, which could have started from our Big Bang, joined to all the possible endings for our universe, a concept which we often refer to as infinity, and treat them all as a single point. So for us, a point in the seventh dimension would be infinity, all possible timelines which could have or will have occurred from our Big Bang. When we describe infinity as being a point in the seventh dimension, we're only imagining part of the picture. If we're drawing a seventh dimensional line, we need to be able to imagine what a different point in the seventh dimension is going to be, because that's what our line is going to be joined to. But how can there be anything more than infinity? The answer is, there can be other completely different infinities created through initial conditions which are different from our own Big Bang. Different initial conditions will create different universes, where the basic physical laws such as gravity or the speed of light are not the same as ours. And the resulting branching timelines from that universe's beginning to all its possible endings will create an infinity which is completely separate from the one which is associated with our own universe. So the line we draw in the seventh dimension will join one of those infinities to another. And as boggling as the magnitude of what we're exploring here might be, if we were to branch off from that seventh dimensional line to draw a line to yet another infinity, we'd then be entering the eighth dimension. As we've explored already, we can jump from one point in any dimension to another simply by folding it through the dimension above. If our ant on the newspaper were a two-dimensional flatlander, then folding his two-dimensional world to the third dimension would allow him to magically disappear from one location and appear in a different one. As we're now imagining the ninth dimension, the same rules would apply. If we were to be able to instantaneously jump from one eighth dimensional line to another, it would be because we're able to fold through the ninth dimension. Before we discuss the first dimension, we could say that we first started out with dimension 0, which is the geometrical concept of the point. A point indicates a location in a system, and each point is of indeterminate size. The first dimension then takes two of these points and joins them with a line. When we imagined the fourth dimension, it was as if we were treating the entirety of three-dimensional space in a particular state as a single point, and drawing a fourth-dimensional line to another point, representing space as it is in a different state. We often refer to the line we have just drawn as time. Then, in the 7th dimension, we treated all of the possible timelines which could be generated from our Big Bang as if this were a single point, and imagined drawing a line to a point representing all the possible timelines for a completely different universe. Now, as we enter the 10th dimension, we have to imagine all the possible branches for all the possible timelines of all the possible universes and treat that as a single point in the 10th dimension. So far, so good. But this is where we hit a roadblock. If we're going to imagine the 10th dimension as continuing the cycle and being a line, then we're going to have to imagine a different point that we can draw that line to. But there's no place left to go. By the time we have imagined all possible timelines for all possible universes as being a single point in the 10th dimension, it appears that our journey is done. In string theory, physicists tell us that superstrings vibrating in the 10th dimension are what create the subatomic particles which make up our universe, and all of the other possible universes as well. In other words, all possibilities are contained within the 10th dimension, which would appear to be the concept we have just built for ourselves, as we imagined the 10 dimensions built one upon another.
But I would like to explain to you my perspective, what the chakras are. Would you like to hear that? Because people don't, in my mind, fully grasp what they are because they're trying to grasp what they are. You know, you've got to let go of that. And I've worked out what I think is quite a simple little tale, yeah, which allows us to build up an understanding of what the chakras do. It takes about 5-10 minutes, okay? So if you imagine modern mathematics now as geometry, pyramids, the buildings, it's all based on cylinders and circles and what have you. I just mentioned chaos and fractals. It's another type of geometry. And interestingly, the geometry that we've grown up with, Euclidean geometry, is the geometry of man-made things, the things that we make. And fractal geometry is the ability for us to observe how nature works. Yeah? Okay. So that was just an aside. The base chakra is what I'm talking about. The base chakra, people talk about the base chakra as being all about potential. Yeah? Potential. And if you actually get the geometry of the chakras in mind, what the base chakra would be signified by would be a dot, just a point, okay, at one dimension. Now, if you imagine consciousness in one dimension, it's got no opportunity to reflect upon anything else. So it's just potential. Yeah, it's just potential. Okay, now that's the base chakra, and the base chakra is all about grounding. They talk about survival, you know, fight or flight. Yeah, this point. But the next chakra is all about relationships and the family. So number 2 chakra. So the base chakra is earth and potential, and then the navel chakra, just below the belly button, is all about relationships, especially family. So imagine my geometry again. There's a little point full of potential, and he goes to see his mum and his dad and his sister and his auntie and his friends, and he's suddenly got spatial awareness. Yeah, because there's me and there's you over there. There's me and there's you over there. Now, ironically, the me doesn't know who I am yet, but it knows mum and dad and sister and brother and dog and cat. Okay, so this is 2D. The base chakra is 1D, the navel chakra is 2D, and the solar plexus is 3D. The solar plexus is when your little cartoon drawings come to life. It's us in this room. There's real people in here, sitting here, physical people, not just a drawing of you, but a physical person in 3D. And that is me, the point, full of potential, meeting my auntie and my sister and my mum and my dad and my friends. And then the very important first loop of life. This is the ego. This is the seat of self. So this is now me looking in the mirror and seeing myself and going, oh, that's Thornton, not that some bird tapping its head on the window. This is 3 still. And now remember I used the word 3D. Yeah? Now what's space? Space is 3D. Yeah? Okay. So the lower chakra is full of potential. The navel chakra has all the memories and all the stories about relationships. I'm constantly talking about relationships when I'm looking at this area in their biofields. This area is all about relationships. So now I'm self-aware. Okay, but we're all still frozen in space. Yeah? It's only when you have time. They talk about the space-time continuum, that this frozen space with this building and the cars out there and you sitting here on these chairs and gathered around, be frozen until we have time. Yeah? Time animates space. Yeah? And time, to me, is the heart chakra. So the lower 3 chakras govern and navigate space. So I can run over there, I can grab a glass of water, I can run up that street, I can go and get some food. That's my lower 3 chakras navigating me in 3D space. That's what they do, subconsciously. Yeah? If there's anything wrong with your spatial awareness or mobility, you'll find it imprinted also in those lower 3 chakras. Okay, now I said earlier, the heart is time. Now remember that when the Greeks measured the heartbeat, 1,500, 2,000 years ago, our average heartbeat was 60 beats a minute. This 85, 120, that's stress. That's modern living that's done that. A normal, healthy human being beats, their heart beats with time. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying everyone needs to go low blood pressure now because the modern environment, we've evolved. Don't get that wrong. I'm just saying historically, that's how we've evolved up through a slower heartbeat. And, time speeds up, so does our heartbeat. Time speeds up, so does our heartbeat. Our heartbeat, you see, look, I'm standing on Earth, yeah? There's this concept of day-night, yeah? I go to bed, I get up, the sun goes away, comes back, la la la. But if we jumped off Earth, just one leap, all of us here, just leap, pew, a few miles, it'd be one long sunny day. There's no day-night. It's immediately a different concept of time. Time is because we're stuck here on Earth. And in fact, the chakras that I mentioned so far, the lower 4 chakras, they act like gyroscopes. So that though I'm here, standing on this ball that's spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, within a solar system which itself is charging towards the constellation of Hercules at God knows what speed, we feel still. That's incredible. Our chakras are doing that. So what I'm saying is that the lower 4 chakras help us navigate and experience space-time, which is what we're all doing in here now. And a lot of people in the world, that's all they ever get to experience. They're human doings, office workers, guys that don't think much. They do their thing, they go get their food, they watch some movies, they sleep, they have a routine. That's what they do. They don't have cosmic thoughts. They don't think to go help the guy down the road. They just don't go beyond the space-time continuum. Yeah. Now, I was alluding earlier that many studies have now been conducted, some published, proving distant healing. And I was mentioning an example, ironically, one of our colleagues here is a body talker, and this was one of the senior body talkers who I did the distant healing study with. It was for the International Society, the Study of Subtle Energy and Energy Medicine conference a few years back. And we did a study where 10 people were in our lab in India and the healer was in America, and we catalogued the healing process they went through, and it was incredible. And that's just one of many studies that have been done. So how does that work? Well, healers operate a triage between their throat chakra, communication, their brow chakra, their intuition, their scanning, their ability to conscious scan, and their crown chakra, which is the source of the energy required for this extraterrestrial experience. I mean, extra body experience, extra corpus experience. So this triage occurs beyond space-time. The lower four chakras are managing and limited. So when people are saying, hey, we're going into 5D world, or, you know, we're moving out of duality. I don't know whether you saw that picture I posted recently. It was a beautiful, very simple picture. It was a picture of a yin-yang. And someone had shown that when you look at a yin-yang flat like a pancake on a piece of paper, it looks like the two dots are side by side. But the yin-yang is actually a toroid. And so this concept of good, bad, this yin-yang to me as a kid was like duality. It was like the dance of Shiva and Shakti. It was like, it's okay, this duality, but it's an illusion based on a flattened geometry. So what we're saying now in the current age is that we're able to appreciate more and navigate more these dimensions by understanding the kind of thing that I've just explained. Because that's really simple and juicy. It allows me here in my throat to be beyond space and time. Yeah, that data can be recorded and it can be dug up in some pot in 2,000 years and read fresh as if I uttered it just now. And so healing occurs when people are able to hold a space which allows for that potential to not be stuck or frozen in space-time. So it's able to be more fluid. And we're observing that with Biofield Viewer. Now, I have